Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 135, and we're back with a faction takedown. And so, for this episode, we're going to be talking about the Shock Army of Acontecimento. They obviously returned to the game in the October update in uh, just this last year, and they came with some new toys and surprises, and they just went up on pre order as a recording. So you can get the vast majority of the sectorial right now from Arsenal or CB or any other retailers there. But before we get started, we want to take a moment to thank Mo Games, sponsor of Metachemistry. And over at mo-games.com, you can find all your Infinity needs there, like Sedeca Cemento Bundle. And as part of their sponsorship, all of our patrons that are of any paid level get a 10% discount code to their store. And whether you are a patron or not, just by joining our Discord, you're entered in for a raffle for a $40 coupon code each month. You just need to join the Discord, hit the roll for Mo giveaways, and you'll need a US address for Mo to ship to. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. So, it is Ian and myself for this episode doing another faction takedown. Going to talk about how to beat Acontecimento. But beforehand, Ian, how have things been going for you lately? Any more games yet, or is this still the Great House Saga?
Yes. So yeah, the house thing has been going on with trying to get the basement built. Man, like I'll tell you, trying to find a contractor that's not just an absolute flake has been a nightmare. I've contacted like 10 different businesses for it. I've had like 5 people even call me back. 3 of them have come out to look at it. I've got 1 bid so far. Maybe I got another one that I have a meeting set with. But like I had guys that like after they came through and walked said, "Yo, yeah, we'll have this out to you in a couple days." Ghosted. Guys that set up an appointment and everything, and then just never showed up, and then won't answer their phone when you call them. So it's been a lot of fun for no good reason. And outside of that, starting a new position at my job tomorrow. So that's going to be entertaining. Been trying to kind of square away everything for the old position to make the transfer easy. So been really busy with that as well. And then as far as gaming, we started a campaign of the new BattleTech Aces system. It's a interesting system to play BattleTech like narrative campaign without having somebody playing the opposing force. It's all done through like AI deck cards.
And sure, so it's like a cooperative narrative campaign, kind of RPG elements to it.
A little bit. So like you have pilots and they gain experience and get better and can get skills. And then during the campaign and the missions, there's a bit of like a choose your own adventure aspect to it where certain objectives go down on the table, and when the mission tells you to interact with them, like you'll flip it over and say, okay, it's letter A, and then you'll flip to the back of the book to see what letter A for that mission is, and then like apply whatever effect it is. So there's a little bit of that, and then when you finish a mission, it's kind of like a branching campaign. So then you kind of like the first mission, you take your pick of one of 3, and then from there, you beat that, and then you choose one of 2 follow-up missions, kind of thing. It's pretty interesting.
Nice.
That said, they definitely needed to do this as an app. Like I like having the physical cards, but I think it would run a lot smoother if there was an app for it to kind of help run that. Yeah, because it's just a little like, okay, let's cross-reference this table and go down the card, and it's basically just a series of if-then statements, and you find the going top to bottom, the one that's the first one that's relevant kind of thing, and then okay, apply that, and then keep going down until applying further conditions until everything's done or you've run out of conditions to try to see if they're relevant. I think it works very well, but an app would have been very nice in addition to kind of speed things up a little bit.
Sure.
But I'm
Makes
excited
sense.
for them to expand this out. They want to do a few other campaigns in this kind of style with this system. So that's been a lot of fun. And then as far as Infinity, haven't gotten to play a game in a while, but hopefully that'll be changing with the Grow League that you're going to run. And then we got a local tournament for Warcrow coming up, where I think I'm going to be playing the CNN Elves again because nobody else plays them. And that's fine, because I can go out there and be the problem. I'm fine being the problem. Especially now that I have kitties, because they put out their like jungle cloud leopard cavalry, and they just look like ridiculous fun. So I will probably shove those down everybody's throat this coming weekend.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, for me, I've been getting regular games in again since the holidays, which has been nice. I rotated Steel Phalanx back into my bag and played them this past week. That was neat to try, to see, not just on paper how different they've been since N5, but to actually get a little bit of table time with them. So that was fun. And yeah, so we have a Grow League that's going to start on March 7th? No. Something close to that. The first Thursday of March is when we're starting it. And so that'll go for 10 weeks. And so I am putting together a packet for that and going to make custom missions. And so, yeah, for listeners at home, if that's something that you think might be interesting to see or you might want for your communities, let me know and I'll see about posting my stuff for the Training Incident League that we run every year. So yeah, but beyond that, Acontecimento. So we're here to show you how to best combat Shock Army, arguably the least PanO there is. So just to kind of frame the discussion a little bit, we'll start off with talking about their general strengths and weaknesses. And so for their strengths, I think one of the things that you would expect from PanO is that they generally have good gunfighting. Shock Army, I don't think is any exception to that. I don't think that they are the top end as far as PanO can achieve, but they do still have, they have more than one BS-15 unit, and they have lots of big guns. They have a lot of BS-13, a little bit of 14, but mostly BS-13 units as kind of average for most of the attack pieces you're going to see. A lot of MSV1 access, though notably no MSV2 access, and a lot of mimetism. Like close to half the faction, I think, has mimetism, but always Mim 3, not really Mim 6, except for one mercenary in Armand Lamouette. Otherwise, a lot of Mim 3. So, as is to be expected, gunfighting is definitely something that they are going to do pretty well at. But, Ian, other major strengths you think of when somebody mentions they're bringing Shock Army to the table?
They have a fair amount of board control with like guys that can deploy outside of the deployment zone and mine layer and drop troops and things like that. No hidden deployment, but they have a fair amount of the rest of it, and it's actually kind of funny because due to that they actually play almost like Ariadna.
Right? Yeah, they're not terribly far off in some ways.
Yeah.
They don't have as much camo as you might expect of an Ariadne faction, but they definitely have that kind of, and it's reflected in the models too, to some degree, that kind of guerrilla fighter sort of look and feel to some of them.
Yeah, especially the regulars, who are really cool models. But yeah, they're definitely stripped down. They don't have any armor, but they're a PanO basic Lion Troop option that has Whip 13. So they're kind of special there.
Right. Yeah, and so generally speaking, they have a higher average willpower than other panosectorials. Like 13 is the average here instead of just the average of most of the rest of Infinity. So that's really nice for Acontecimento. Um, I agree. They don't really have much in terms of infiltration, just another external unit in the form of the Naga, but they do have a lot of forward deployment,
Hmm.
and so they can really kind of get up there and get things going pretty quickly. And they have, I would say, good fireteam flexibility, not
Yeah.
necessarily by keywords, but they do have a lot of the options of things that you would want to be messing around with are going to be able to join fire teams, and you can kind of use good profiles for the job to
Hmm.
form a variety of good fire teams with this faction. Uh, so I'd say that they're flexible, at least in that regard.
I think a lot of that flexibility comes from the fact that as one of the out of print sectorials that they don't have as fully fleshed out a list of options as a lot of the other sectorials, but that's also kind of a strength because it gives them the flexibility in what they do have and can fire a team with kind of almost freely, and that everything has a place in the list and you can take most of, but as always, not everything that you would want in one list, but it's much more concise and easier to digest and focus than some of the other sectorials, which have a lot more profiles.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think to some extent that kind of segues nicely into some of their weaknesses as well, in that they do have a more limited roster. Like, they don't have as deep a pool of units as some other sectorials. They do, you still kind of feel their age a little bit in that regard. But I would also say that they don't really have tools for close combat. Like, there are only a couple units that are even like pretty good in close combat in the form of the Knights of Montesa, and they're, they're all right. They're not bad at all. They're CC 23 with martial arts 2 and PS 68 weapons. That's not bad, but it is not great. And that's kind of the top end of the faction.
Hmm.
The next one down is the Carrot Jump Troop, Kirpal Singh, with CC 21 martial arts 1. And he does have an EM close combat weapon, which is great, but that is like just barely passable. Like, that's like, okay, I might be willing to spend an order to get him to CC if there's a target that's not good in close combat. That's
Hmm.
kind of the floor, but everything else in the faction is below those two.
Beast
So
Hunter's 21, but it has no mimic, no
no
martial
skills.
arts. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, beast hunters are not actually CC troops. They just pretend.
Well, and the mute is also 21 with no skills.
Right, right. But like, that's like, I'm to me that's a threshold where I'm not going to actively spend orders to do that unless there is some sort of wildly outlandish scenario where it actually might be beneficial if I'm picking on,
Yeah.
I don't know, a CC 13 Hollow Man with no skills or something, and I can't
Yeah.
outshoot them because I need to worry about the template or something. I don't know. Like,
Yeah. And
there has to
Scylla's a
be
20,
very particular circumstances.
and then everything else is like 17 or less.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Acontecimento is not good in close combat. Even their best close combat units are only pretty good in close combat.
Yeah.
Like, good
Yeah.
enough that I'd be willing to go and, charge an item on Tessa into something in CC. But even then, those are units that would prefer to shoot if they have the option. So, yeah, I would say CC is a big one. What about you, Ian? What is one of your go tos for tearing through Acontecimento?
Well,
Things where they struggle.
honestly, they don't have a lot of armor in comparison to a lot of Pano. Most of their stuff is going to be sitting at armor 1, maybe 2. The only things that are really above that is the heavy infantry, and they're I mean, you got a 3 on the Guardia de Assalto. You've got a 4 on the Knight Montesa, 4 on the Orc, and then you get into tags. But
Hmm.
they're just, most of their stuff is really low armor. They do have some okay BTS, but like nothing super crazy in that realm. Mostly just
Sure.
a couple units that have like a 3 on like the Bagmarian characters. There's a couple characters that are a 6. But yeah, even the Guardia de Assalto, they're only a 3. The Knight Montesa is a 6. Orcs are a 3, and then you get to the tags for 6s. But yeah, they don't have a super ton of resilience. They're relying on that mimetism and their high ballistic skill more than anything to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of the faction is single wound, which, I mean, you can kind of say that about a lot of factions. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that that is a faction weakness, but just kind of tacking on to
Hmm.
your point of most of the faction doesn't have a very high set of saves on average. And so
Yeah.
that kind of compounds that a little bit, is that they're a little on the glass cannon side of things.
Hmm.
Um, but I'd say one other thing beyond that, though, is they don't have any albedo, meaning
Yep.
that marksmanship and MSV are going to be very useful against them. So make sure to pack some MSV and or marksmanship if you can, because that's going to negate a lot of the benefit you're seeing from the Acontecimento's units, is that they're going to lean into that mimetism pretty heavily, and they don't have any real tools to counter MSV unless we look at the Eclipse smoke launcher on the Guardia Assalto, which is a standout piece for that reason, is that it
Yes.
brings you vision control where you don't have it otherwise. And they don't get disco ballers. So that's kind of like the claim to fame that the Guardia Assalto has had, is that this was pano smoke, meaning like no one could see through it, but this was the exception, that pano has some sort of vision control, which obviously has changed since N5. But yeah, Acontecimento really wants to dictate the terms of engagements, and if they can't lean on mimetism, then they struggle a little bit with that. Unless you're the Dragao, I suppose.
Yeah.
The Dragao just applies more bullet.
More and more bullet.
Right. Well, then next, when you're looking at Acontecimento across the table, next we'll go over some of their kind of standout units. These are things that we would consider common picks for the faction, and so you're likely to see some or most of these in lists pretty frequently. And so, just an easy one to start off with, we just mentioned the Guardia de Salto. This is their unique heavy infantry, and the Guardia de Salto is really kind of a unique profile, and it did get an extra profile when it returned in the October update. So the main things to see with the Guardia Assalto is that it is a heavy infantry with 2 vitality, but it's a light heavy infantry with arm and BTS 3. But it is BS 15. And it has combat instinct and MIM 3. And it brings an Oxbot. The Oxbot also has combat instinct and MIM 3, but it brings a light shotgun, Eclipse grenade launcher, and light flamethrower. And that Oxbot is on all 3 profiles for the Guardia Assalto. The
It's kind of their thing.
trooper. Exactly. And so this is their vision control. They're AVA 2, and the bot is ballistic skill 11, so it's not unreasonable to just try and shoot out some Eclipse smoke when the Garda is engaging otherwise, if the bot can't get into an effective range band with its other weapons.
Mhm.
Or if you just kind of want to do it for free, you can do so that way. But the Guardia Assalto has a multi-rifle heavy flamethrower decharges, or it swaps the full multi-rifle for a Spitfire, or it swaps the Spitfire for a heavy rocket launcher plus 1 burst.
And AP heavy pistol on everything.
Yeah, AP heavy pistol just in case. And yeah, and it's in the 40 to 44 points for the Spitfire. The other two are 40 points. And then the SWC weapons are both 1.5 SWC. This is a profile I think you're not going to see it in every Acontecimento list by any stretch, but I think you'll see it commonly, partially because it fills that vision control role with an
Mm-hmm.
Oxbot. It's not the most efficient way to do so, but it's the only option in Acontecimento, and that by itself is notable. And so it's
Yes.
a solid gunfighter. It's BS-15 with mimetism, with a bot that has weapons that can force a face-to-face. It can either shotgun or flamethrower as well. The Guardia Assalto either has a regular ballistic skill weapon or a direct template with a heavy flamethrower. So both of them can fork independently of one another, or even at multiple targets if you send them different directions, as long as you're maintaining coherency.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a mean piece. Like, you can do some cool stuff with these guys, and so that's something to definitely watch out for. And remember that it is the bot that has the Eclipse. So if you can't deal with a Guardia Assalto easily, you can still take care of the Oxbot to at least eliminate the Eclipse grenade on the table.
Yeah. This is the number one model in the faction that I want a new sculpt for. And I know I'm not going to get it, but I'm still asking for it.
It would be cool, but yeah, I doubt that there's going to be new models for this faction for quite a while.
Yeah.
Maybe in another edition or two, but
Mm-hmm.
it is not this day. What about you, Ian? What's a unit you would think that, oh, my opponent just announced a Acontecimento at the table, I have to be ready for X?
Absolutely Bogmari. They're kind of the unit that the faction's built around at this point, and especially with the updates that they got, they are the backbone. And I would expect to see at least 3 Bogmari in any given list. And so they are medium infantry. They're BS-13, armor 2, BTS-3, only 1 vitality. But the key on this is that every one of them has MSV1, Mimetism 3, NCO, number 2, Terrain Total, and Warhorse. So they ignore a significant amount of penalties coming their way. Their fire team's not breaking, and they can use that lieutenant order freely. So they're pretty fantastic. They come in at the bottom level with a forward observer with a +1 burst boarding shotgun for 22 points. That also has decharges, which is pretty fantastic. The basic line Bogmari has a combi rifle with light shotgun for 23 points. So, that's a good one to fill things in. They have a paramedic profile. Then they have a couple of lieutenant profiles. One is combi rifle light shotgun. The other one is a heavy machine gun, which is pretty good. They have a hacker, which is the standard loadout, combi rifle light shotgun with a hacking device. They have an HMG. They also have a multi-sniper rifle with shock mines and mine layer.
Mm-hmm.
So normally what I would see with them is I would see the sniper a lot. I'd see the paramedic a lot. I'd see the forward observer boarding shotgun a lot. I would expect to see those 3 in most lists in some combination. Maybe there's a lieutenant in there. Maybe that could be the HMG, because curiously, a lot of factions, if the lieutenant can carry like a heavy weapon like the HMG, they give it an SWC discount. They didn't do that here. They just gave it a 3-point discount off of what it normally is 27 instead of 30 points. Same with the combi rifle. It's 2 points cheaper at 21 instead of 23. Now, that could partially be because they have NCO and they could just use the lieutenant order, but they are one of a handful of units in the game that, because the lieutenant has NCO, the lieutenant can use his own lieutenant order without revealing that he is the lieutenant, and can do it inside of a fire team. So that's a pretty cool thing to do just for fire team flexibility. So they are the backbone of the faction. They can go into most of the fire teams. They have, you can put them in with regulars. You can have them be part of their own fire team. The other cool aspect here is that the machinists for Acon have terrain total and mimetism, and they count as Bagmari in the fire teams. So that's super cool. And then Lieutenant Stephen Rao is a Bagmari lieutenant. So he's a wild card, but he is counts as a Bagmari because that's what he is. And he has basically all of their same stuff with MSV1 and number 2 and Warhorse. He curiously does not have NCO, but you're going to know he's the lieutenant if he's on the table for the most part because he has an NCO profile, but his other 2 profiles are both lieutenants. He's the Whip 14 lieutenant. He's the only Whip 14 lieutenant option in the faction, but he can choose either have an extra command token or 2 lieutenant orders. So
Yep.
he's pretty solid, but yeah, in some combination, I would expect to see at least 3 Bagmaris in just about any list.
Yeah, I agree. And they're another big part of that, I think, is that they are classified powerhouses. Like they can deal or they can achieve a ton of classifieds. Like through just the Bagmaris themselves, across all the profiles, you can do 19 of the 20 classifieds. The only one you can't do is the engineer one, retro engineering for HVTs, because they don't have an engineer. But
And
they can
that's
do
why you throw the
every other
machinist in there.
classified. Right, yeah, exactly. So you can, because they're veteran, they have a visor, they're medium, they have number 2 and NCO, or at least NCO, I think, is the one that it cares about. And yeah, so you have decharges on the forward observer, you have a hacker, you have a medic. Between those 3 profiles, you can do 19 classifieds. And even just without that, you can still do most of them, even with a, does one of the base specialists, much less one of the plain Bagmari, can still do quite a few.
Yeah, and then it's because you throw the machinist in there, maintain your bonuses, and get the 20th.
Yeah, exactly. So they're just also good vehicles to get those classifieds done as well, and just general specialist use because, again, like most of Acontecimento, they're actually willpower 13, and so they're back on par with everybody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say another thing that you're likely to see, again, not every time because, they're kind of a unit where, some people love them and other people might be worried to run kind of a eggs in one basket sort of unit. But the Dragao is just a great fire support piece. It's one of the few non-mimetic attack pieces that they have. Their other tag will pick up the mimetism, but the Dragao is like everything else that we've talked about that generally they're weak to. Like the Dragao doesn't care nearly as much, other than CC, I guess. It still doesn't want to be in CC, but
it's an 18.
It's an 18, yes. That is true, yes. But this is a main battle tag with BS 15. It is whip 13, so that way it can't get fully locked down if it takes an EM hit, for example. But with ARM 8, BTS 6, 3 structure, the full ECM guided suite that you'd expect, the extra saving roll penalty on its attacks. Notably, it has immunity to continuous damage, which is not something that will come up all the time. But in a world where we're increasingly seeing attack pieces with the thing that everyone who listens regularly knows that I don't like, but or low PS, high burst, long range AP continuous weaponry, the more of those things you have together, the more I dislike them. But it's actually well positioned against those sorts of things. So if you're running into a lot of Ulans or Agamemnons or Wreckers or Adil or things like that, the Drago actually has a leg up there in that it's still going to hurt, because they're high damage or low PS. Someday I'll transition to N5 terminology fully, but it's not today. Don't mind me. But low PS AP hits, but at least it's not going to, take a one hit from an Ulan rocket launcher and then just burn off the table. And it's packing the hyper rapid magnetic cannon and an extra burst heavy flamethrower. So it has a big gun with a high ballistic skill, and this is kind of one of your main AP hit pieces because there's not a ton of long range armor piercing otherwise. Like there are some things, but generally speaking, like if you want the big gun, this is the big gun of the faction.
Yeah, because the HMG on the Bagmari is standard. The HMG on the Tikbalang is standard. It just happens to be -1 on the saving roll. The Spitfire on like the regular is standard. So yeah, there is not a whole lot of high burst, long range AP. There's a few multi-sniper rifles that can fill some of the long range AP, but yeah, this is your big gun.
Yeah. So these are things that I would expect to see, semi-frequently. So things that, oh, I need to be aware of this possibility and consider that in deployment if my opponent says they're playing a shock army.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Ian? Any others you want to highlight?
Yes. A single loadout on a single unit that I think shows up fairly often. So we talked about the regulars. Their line troops are whip 13, don't have any armor and all that. And they have a few different loadouts from what the rest of PanO's line troopers have. And they have some cool stuff. You get your standard, like here's a forward observer, has a deployable repeater. Okay, that's cool. Here's your paramedic and all that. Here, they have a Spitfire instead of an HMG. Okay. They have regular that has a mine layer with shock mines, center and triangulated fire with a combi rifle. Okay, that's kind of neat. They have a hacker who has cyber mines and a fast panda. Okay, that's pretty solid. But the one I'm talking about is the regular with multi-sniper rifle. Because this is one of the few models in the game that has sapper.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just super, super useful on a model like this to deny routes of advance in ARO, because you can just deploy it wherever it could normally deploy, but now you don't have to think about is it in cover or not, because it brings its cover with it effectively and also gains mimetism. So it opens up a lot of your deployment area to being able to get those really good lines of sight to lock down some of those fire lanes and routes of advance that you might not be able to otherwise get to through having to hug cover or be on top of a building or something like that. So that's the one that even if you don't see any other regulars, you'll probably see that one. And it's also cheap. It's 1 point or 20 points in one SWC. It's solid and can be a big problem.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely something to keep in mind. Like the regulars are actually pretty reasonable. Like they have some, I feel like there's generally been a move away from larger cores and having those defensive castles and things like that. Those are just not functioning the same way in N5. And so the utility line trooper, I think, is much more appealing in this edition. And regulars bring some of that. And I think that, again, I agree that the sniper is kind of a nice intersection of some special ability as well as some fairly affordable long-range defense. Like now that most line troopers with sniper rifles or multi-sniper rifles, they've gone down from 1.5 SWC to 1 SWC, which is great. That way, you're not paying quite as much because you're not putting it on as high quality of a trooper. So that's really cool.
This one's still DS12.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, in the foxhole state from Sapper, Like you said, you get the freedom of placement,
Mhm.
which is arguably the most important part of that. And then you also pick up mimetism again. So they're still a BS-12 mimetic trooper effectively in cover from all directions and can deploy anywhere they need to, which is great. I could
Yeah.
even see someone picking a pair of them
Mhm.
just to make a cheap duo, just to cover, sit 8 inches apart or roughly to
Yeah.
cover a couple lanes,
Get the
and
special
that
die
be
on
annoying
it.
enough.
Yeah. Well, also, they are AVA total, so you could
Mhm.
be a dickbag and take 6 of them potentially.
Hmm.
I'm not
I
saying
mean,
anybody would,
yes,
but you could.
it is possible.
It's only
I would
120
not.
points.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No. But I think 2 of them would actually be pretty reasonable in a lot of lists.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, actually, I suppose you can't make a regular duo, so my mistake on that. You would need a third one. So maybe like the
Cool.
paramedic or a hacker or something like that.
Yeah, just to bring them paramedic, just to bring them back up. Or
Yeah,
hear me out. 3 snipers.
3
Let's go.
hackers. Yeah, or snappers. There we go. Yep, there we go. But yeah, so I agree. I think regulars are also a very common pick. They're just a good faction glue. It kind of helps with some of the cheaper utility. It lets you afford some of the higher end of the faction. So if you want to bring a Dragao or you want to bring a Tikbalang or something like that, it's definitely easier on the points if you start off with a handful of regulars instead. And then you're welcome to snag another one otherwise, but I think that the last one for me is probably going to be the Knights of Montesa.
Mhm.
I think that they have both the on foot and motorized versions, and I think that they're both pretty solid in different ways. The nice thing about the foot Montesa is that they gain a special die on their ballistic skill attacks, which is just a very powerful ability. It's just a great defensive and offensive tool. In some ways, it's better than, I mean, a lot of the time, even I might say it's better than an extra burst. I mean, it's better the higher burst you already have, I suppose. But yeah, the Foot Montesa gets the special die, which is really interesting on uh, like the shotgun paramedic with the Blitzen. I think you can do some cool stuff there. Notably, they do have a limited cover, but they do have mimetism. So you're kind of back to a wash against non-MS troops. And actually, you stay that way against marksmanship troops, which is kind of funny. I just hadn't really considered that before, but that's kind of a fun little bonus.
Mhm.
But they are cheap. They're relatively durable, unlike a lot of the faction, and they can fight pretty well at a distance and pretty well in close combat. They're just generally well-rounded pieces. And the motorized knights, of course, are just going to be very, very fast. They trade off the extra special die for 8-6 move, and I mean, just having a specialist for 23 points that is 2 vitality, that's that fast, it's still whip 13 again, uh, and again, is relatively durable with arm 4 BTS 6. Like, it is just a great add-in that is not a huge burden on your list by any means. So I think that they're both AVA 2, and so I would say seeing 1 or 2 Knights of Montesa is not going to be uncommon. I don't think you'll see them all the time, particularly the foot ones, because I think the motorized kind of generally is more enticing because of the order efficiency and movement. But
Mhm.
and you can fire team them together as well. You can.
But I got some really cool foot models that need to be played with that don't have
Also true.
motocross helmets.
Oh, right, there's that. Yeah, not a huge fan of the over helmet.
Yeah, there's a few of the sculpts for the Montesa when they used to before they were had motorcycles as the option, where they were only on foot, and uh, yeah, they were really cool, and I'm happy that they're useful again.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, I think that they're pretty interesting. Also, I think kind of a cool way you can use the foot Montesa is that you can use them as a forward Montesa duo. So you can run both
Mhm.
of those forward deployment versions that are forward deployment 8 inches. And yeah, run, say, a Red Fury and a paramedic in a duo already up the field a ways and just kind of get right to things.
Get 2 special
So that's kind
dice.
of fun too, with 2 special dice.
That's 6
So,
die, Red Fury, that's kinda
Red Fury,
gross.
yeah.
Oof. Oof.
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad.
It's just a lot of chances to crit.
Many bullets. Yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, any last things that you want to highlight? I just thought of a few other things that I wanted to mention, and
Mhm.
so why don't you go ahead and take it, and maybe you'll get one of the ones I just thought of, and this time I'll actually be.
Yeah, so one of the other ones yeah, one of the other units that, is a personal favorite of mine, and, they're super cool models. They are really useful profiles, even if they are effectively pretty bare bones, but, like, for the cost, they are exactly what you need, and they bring just enough utility to, the faction to do exactly what you need them to do in that moment, is the Akalis, the Sikh Commandos, the combat jump troopers of the faction. They are cheap enough in the 21 to 26 point range that you'll commonly see them, at least one, in a lot of lists. Because they can also do a lot of classifies because they're medium infantry, as well as having specialists and potentially
And they're
D
elite, and
charges and yeah, elite troopers
mhm.
and like they do a lot. They're BS 13 and armor 2, no BTS though. But they have your standard combat jump parachutist, super jump jet propulsion. They're also religious troops, so they're not gonna fail guts tests on you, unless you want them to. In which case, they're gonna not fail those because, well, you wanted them to. But
Never
the
when you
profiles on them,
actually want them to.
exactly. So the profiles start off at 21 points. There's a specialist operative with a +1 burst boarding shotgun who has D charges, deployable repeater, and all the collies have an EM close combat weapon. Their CC is 16, so it's not good. Uh, I really want to use it. I know it's not good. I really want to stab somebody with it because why give them an EM close combat weapon if I'm not going to stab somebody with it?
I don't
Just
know if
saying.
I've ever heard you say something's not good.
Like it's awesome. It's CC 16 is what's not awesome. And it's so much more effective to do with just like anything else, but I want to go stab a remote with it because it's funny.
I suppose
But
there's that.
but for 2 points more, you drop the D charges, you drop the play repeater, you drop the specialist, you get a combi rifle, but it has an EM carbine, so that's super useful. So you can get some EM where you need it. That's useful. They also have a hacker at 25 points, or you can drop a Spitfire in someone's backline for 26. So they're pretty stripped down. They don't have a lot of flashy extra rules, but that also means that it's a BS 13 combat jumper in the low 20s. They can do a lot of classifieds.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Akalis were going to be one of the ones that I thought, like, oh, no, that would be important to mention. And I
Mhm.
would lump Kirbal Singh in there. We've talked about him a little bit
Yeah.
already, but he's the character Akali. Main things for him is he's actually like passable in CC, as we mentioned at the top, with CC
Mhm.
21 and Martial Arts 1. But he's got either a boarding shotgun with an extra special die on his chain of command profile, or he's got a specialist profile with an AP combi rifle. But otherwise, he's very similar. He does pick up NCO
Yeah.
and a Pip of Fizz, which is actually relevant for them for dropping. Akali's are 11, which is not reliable to drop with, but that leads me to what would be my last pick,
Mhm.
which is Scylla. And so
I just had
I
to
would
bring the
not
A-Lip into
consider,
it.
I did, because it unlocks a playstyle that they wouldn't have without her in it.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is something like you're not going to deal with much more than maybe incidental info war with Acontecimento unless Scylla is there. And then, okay. then I could see them pushing a more proactive InfoWar game plan. And so Scylla, she has ECM hacking -3, which is helpful, of course. That's effectively hacking mimetism. She has a modest willpower of 13, but a good BTS of 6. And she has either a standard hacking device with Trinity at -2 to save, so PS4 instead of 6. And she has, on all of her loadouts, she has a pitcher, light shotgun, and emitter. And then she also has an Evo hacker that keeps the Trinity upgrade. And so I still don't think you'd likely see the Evo hacker that often on her, but potentially if you want her projection and the killer hacker ability of being able to Trinity with some extra damage,
Yeah, SR
then
-2. That's gross.
yeah, it hits pretty hard. Like that's effectively the hardest hitting Trinity in the game, tied with the Asura.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if anybody else also has -2, but that's -2 is like the max for Trinity. Theoretically, Mary Problems can get better just because she has an AP on hers. So if you have if you're fighting like an Interventor or something, or other things that have really that have 6+ BTS, then it comes out ahead that way with AP. But generally speaking, it's the hardest hitting Trinity in the game. And yeah, she also has her Davabot pet. She has the Charybdis, which is a repeater built in, has ECM hacker still, and has a built in flamethrower. And then she also has an interesting profile where you can take them as a joint unit where the Charybdis is an FTO profile. So it's actually 2 units taking up 2 slots that you buy together, similar to, say, Zoe and Pywell, for instance. And it has basically all the same things that it had there, but they are both able to join fire teams as wildcards. They don't have
Yeah.
any. They don't have any keywords to join with that, but putting her in so she's a BS12 pitcher with a special dive, you join her with, say, a pair of regulars or a pair of Bogmari or something, then it becomes much more reliable that way. But yeah, so Scylla allows Acontecimento to kind of unlock a more proactive info war game, which I think is really interesting and is more of like I suppose more of a curveball pick where you're not typically going to see something like that, but it's something you should be aware of and know that can happen. Yeah. But from there, I think that we can go over some of their hidden information or surprises. And Acontecimento doesn't have a ton of this. So the main things to note when you are facing off against Acontecimento, their lieutenants are typically going to be pretty obvious. So you have your Acontecimento regulars and Bogmari that are willpower 13. You're likely going to see one of these with a decoy, just because that's like the easiest way to protect the lieutenants in Acontecimento in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or you'll see the kind of, I want to say super lieutenant, but that might be a little bit of a stretch, but the specialized lieutenants, perhaps, in the form of either Stephen Rao, which is the character Bogmari, who can come with either, it's the only Whip 14 lieutenant, and he comes with either an extra command token or lieutenant order, so that will very quickly telegraph that, or the Tikbalang. And the Tikbalang, I think, is another one of those picks where, you're likely to see, and I would kind of lump it in with the Drago. You might even see it more often than the Drago. But it has a lieutenant +1 order profile also, and has tactical awareness. So as we've seen in Kestrel, and I think it's the same in the military orders, if I recall, but it can bring 4 orders by itself for 73 points. And it's a BS15 mimetic light tag with climbing plus and mines and stuff. So also very good. But yeah, otherwise, if it's a Whip 12, it's an Orc. It's an Orc. Yeah. It can't be anything else. So there's only a couple lieutenant profiles, and most of them are obvious. So they either paint a huge target on their backs in the form of Rao or the Tikbalang, or you're probably going to see regulars with a duplicate that are just giving fireteam bonuses to a sniper or similar. Mm-hmm. Those are kind of the main things you're going to see in terms of the lieutenant. As far as off the board units, like Ian had mentioned earlier, they don't have any hidden deployment, so you don't have to worry about that. So no hidden deployment, no impersonation, no hollow mask. So that leaves us with airborne deployment. So we've talked about both of those units a little bit, but they have the Akalis and Kirpal Singh, the character Akali. And so those are going to be the only off the table orders. So if they're missing combat group slots and it doesn't look like a particularly heavy list, there's a good chance you're seeing an Akali or two. Now they are AVA 3 and then Kirpal on top of that, but I think it's uncommon that you're going to see that many of them, but one or two, that combination of 4, I think is reasonably likely. So that kind of leaves, as far as their obfuscation game goes, camouflage. So, Ian, do you want to go over some of the camo options a little bit?
Yep. So outside of mines, which there's a limited amount of mine layer options, so it's pretty easy to figure out what those mines are by going, hey, that guy, how many mines does he have left? And so you can figure that out usually pretty easily. So outside of that, there's only 3 units that actually have camouflage in some form, and none of them are actually PanO units. So the first is the Beast Hunters. Now, here's the fun thing. If you see irregular orders and you don't see a Warcore or Sasha on the board, well, that's a Beast Hunter, because those are the only 3 irregular orders, and only the Beast Hunter can take camo. And not on every profile, but just most of them. Outside of that, the other 2 are both Aleph units. You have Dart, who is a monster in every faction that can take her. And, I'm actually, I like Dart in Acon as much as I don't like her in military orders.
Yeah.
So I don't know, thematically, Dart feels better in Acon to me.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think she jives with the list better. But regardless, you have Dart with her MSV1, camo climbing plus, decoy, forward deployment 8 inches, mimetism, no wound in cap. She's a specialist, has stealth, surprise attack, -3, train total. She's just the monster she always is, with her +1 special die, viral tactical bow, and AP SMGs and things like that. And she also has a mine layer option with shock mines. So there's potential for her to lay out 3 camo markers between her decoy, and the shock mine. So
yeah,
that's pretty neat. And then the final one is the Aleph Nagas, which fills the solid role of the camo skirmisher infiltrated in the faction. So yep, they're camo. They have infiltration, mimetism 3, surprise attack -3, train total, stealth, all that. They're dogged, which doesn't show up anywhere else in the faction, I believe. So that's actually kind of neat. They're whip 14 for the specialists, which could be a forward observer or a hacker. And that hacker could be regular or killer. And outside of that, they have a mine layer with shock mines. So you potentially get a couple of those up there. And then they have shock mines on a few other profiles. They also have a profile with mono mines. Unfortunately, that cannot be mine layered, because that's just too nasty. You have to, yes, this thing reveals and it has mono mines and it's putting out a camo token. I don't know what that is. But monofilament mines, which don't show up a whole lot. They're very rare piece of equipment in the game. So, but they're a cool one where that's one that you can kind of sneak up to the corner of a building, drop the mono mine in, into a line of sight of whatever's over there, and then kind of step out or somehow trigger an ARO and force the opponent to eat the shots because they're going to have to dodge to try to avoid the mine because it's probably just going to kill the tag if it hits. So it's, even though you can't really hide it, there's some active use case that you can do with the mono mines that can be very, very hard to deal with. So
Yep.
super cool piece of kit that is not common, and Acon gets it. But yeah, that is
60% of the time works every time.
Yeah, that's the 3 camo options in the faction.
Yeah, and so you can break this down a little bit further, and obviously the Acontecimento opponent can manipulate this some, but the Naga is the only infiltrator in the faction.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's past 8 inches over the DZ, then it must be a Naga at that point. And then the other camo markers in terms of Dart and the Beast Hunter, those are going to be for deployment 8 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy to tell if those are at least not DZ mines, of course, because there are a lot of mine layers, but like Ian had said, most of them are going to be publicly seen on the table, just the Naga and potentially Dart, though I don't really think you're going to see the Dart mine layer very much, because I think that it's just too big of an opportunity cost to lose the EM grenades, and she's actually good at
Yeah.
throwing them on a Fizz 13. Like, maybe every once in a while, but I think that the EM grenades are a much more unique tool, and so that
Absolutely.
generally that's what you're going to see. But yeah, so then in that forward band, those you'll see those there, and then further back in the DZ, that's where you're going to see mines from things like the Acontecimento regulars or the Bogmari, and troopers like that. I suppose there could also be the Peacemaker that's forward deployed. But again, you'll see that at least something around the Peacemaker is going to be a mine because it'll be missing some. So, yeah, lots of mines, not a lot of camo troopers. So, that kind of wraps up the hidden info pretty well, I think. There's not a lot that you have to worry about. It's most cards are kind of on the table, but not entirely. There's just enough to give a little doubt.
Yeah.
And to potentially hide an Akali or two, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that, we're just about ready to transition to some final thoughts about Acontecimento. But before we do that, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our supporters. So, for all of our patrons, we so greatly appreciate you supporting the show. It tremendously helps us. It helps with subscription costs and equipment and hosting and all of those things to kind of ease the strain on us financially. So we really, really appreciate you enjoying the show enough to support us that way. And if you are looking to join them, you can find on patreon.com/metachemistry, and we have a variety of benefits to show our thanks in return. So we have things like early access to episodes, we have final voting on polls, we have some private areas on our Discord that you can hang out in, things like that. And even if that's not something that you're able to or interested in, we have our Discord. And so just being a part of our community helps. And so you can join our Discord server, which, other than the aforementioned channels, is completely open and free to whoever would like to join. And it's just a great place to chat more Infinity. And it's a really good way to get in touch with us. So if you want to chat with us, that's some of the best ways to do it. But if not, you can also comment on these episodes on YouTube or on Spotify or on your platform of choice, and we'd love to hear from you. So, with that being said, Ian, final thoughts on taking down Acontecimento.
Yeah, Acon is one of my favorite PanO-Sectorials. I'm really glad to see him back in the game because they play a little differently than the rest of PanO. And it's one of those things where it takes just a little bit different approach to taking them down than you would with the rest of PanO, because they come in with some of those different tools. And you almost have to approach them like you're taking down Ariadna. Obviously, they're a little more high tech than that, but they actually do have a lot of commonalities with a lot of Ariadna in terms of how they deploy, and while they don't have a ton of camo, it's still kind of falls in that area. And so things like having sensor in order to reveal some of those camo markers, because they do have just enough, especially with the decoys, to potentially be a problem. Having MSV in order to negate their mimetism that's across at least half the faction, super important. And anything else that you can bring to kind of exploit their weaknesses. Now, one area that you can exploit with them, if you're good at CC, they're generally not. So that's something to think about if you can get things in there close enough, instead of dealing with their shooting, just go chop them up, especially as they don't have great vision control with just access to the one unit with Eclipse, which is, granted, is more than Pano generally has, but because they're only MSV1, it still gives an advantage through throwing regular smoke, in that they're going to take a -6 penalty on that. So that also can help advance to get into areas to engage them in how you want to engage them. They're susceptible to smoke and MSV2 more than the rest of Pano is. So there's a lot of options to be able to take them down, but they are also the Pano faction that can kind of come at you a little bit sideways, because they do things just that little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think things that you want to try and focus on if you're fighting an Acontecimento opponent, direct template weapons are going to help quite a bit because they are generally a little bit more fragile. Having a good hacking network is going to help for the less fragile things, particularly like the knights or a handful of orcs or the tags or some of their combat remotes even. And then beyond that, if you also can leverage white noise, because they have a lot of MSV threats, so white noise they're going to be very vulnerable to. Even if it's just to get somewhere you need to go, you can use it just for that as opposed to trying to take those gunfights. But you have that option as well to apply those penalties to them. So yeah, those are kind of the main things. Advanced hacking can harm them. Templates are good, especially if they're on disposable troops, where if you can roll those into a couple Bogmari or some regulars and things like that. Also, be careful attacking their DZ. They are actually pretty resistant to being outflanked because they have so many mine layers. And so that kind of whittle down forces pretty quickly if you're not careful. And so it can be kind of tricky to, say, drop a combat jumper in their DZ and start mopping things up, because they can have a fair amount of defensive coverage. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think that that kind of covers most of the tips that we have. If you have other things that you think we missed, or you found these tips helpful, either way, let us know, and we'd love to hear that. And on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin
And Ian, and that's the meta.